Hi, everyone. This is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Life. Before I introduce my guest today, just want to say thank you to our sponsor of these shows, podcasts, and supporter of Peachtree Corners Magazine, and that's EV Remodeling, Inc. Eli has been a great supporter of ours. He's a Peachtree Corner resident, a great company, does good work out here. So check out his website, evremodelinginc.com. And I would thank you, Eli, for supporting us in the shows that we do. Now, let's get into it. We have another candidate today. Actually, she's an incumbent, maybe Mary Robichaux. Robichaux. Let's get that right. Mary Robichaux.
I'm fine.
Thanks for joining me, Mary. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you, Rico. Thank you for having me. And again, I'm fine with my pronunciation of my name. I know it's not the most common name here in Georgia, although we've lived here in Georgia now 34 years. So
Oh, wow.
in
Okay.
either Alpharetta or Roswell. So I do not live in Peachtree Corners, but so we've been here for those 34 years where, my husband and I have been actually in November, we'll be married 45 years. So met in high school and dated all through college. Married. I have twin sons that we've raised here in Georgia. Again, for us, it was over in Fulton County. They're graduates of the Fulton County school system. So they're now actually, again, next month, they'll be 41 years old. So, and now I have two beautiful granddaughters. It's much more fun to be the grandmother sometimes, a lot of times. So we've been here for that long a time when I've worked. My background's healthcare in my professional career. Again, 40 plus years in healthcare um, with a lot of different both clinical and management level experience. Then what I did right before I won election in 2018 was the first time I ever ran for office in my life. So that was kind of an interesting time for us. I actually was the vice president for the American Heart Association for the Division of Quality for the Southeast. So I did work with about 700 hospitals across the Southeast, making sure that we had good cardiovascular care delivery systems. And then we designed statewide systems of care that actually are still in place in a lot of places, in a lot of states today. So very happy with that kind of concept. So that's kind of my background. To give you a little bit, my husband, he actually has worked for, his background is IT, but large corporations. But then probably about 20 years ago, he became what I would call a serial entrepreneur. So he likes to start companies and invest in companies, and then some he keeps. Well, mostly he'll sell. Some he said some have not been as successful as some of the others. So, but that's life too, I think. So
Sure.
that's kind of who I am.
Well, what got you into running? I mean, the original first office you
Well,
landed
the
in.
first office I ran for was this office. So
Right.
I currently do represent what's called House District 48, which
Mhm.
currently is actually majority Roswell, Georgia, is over to your west, and then I cover a little bit of Alpharetta.
Right.
Redistricting will be taking place, so while the number stays the same, the district is shifting a little bit to the east. So that's where now it will cover Roswell, Alpharetta, Johns Creek, and part of Peachtree, a small portion of Peachtree Corners. So
Right. So I'm putting that map up actually.
yeah,
So that's the new district. It takes into Johns Creek, and then the portion of Peachtree Corners, mostly west of Peachtree Industrial Boulevard, I think.
correct. Yeah, up toward Johns Creek, up toward the river. Yeah.
Right.
So,
So very different from what you had before.
yeah, it's very different. It changed probably about 70%. So I'm over in the Roswell corner on this. I am on the eastern portion of 400. So I ran because again in 2018 at the time there was, in my opinion, it was the start of a lot of discourse among between parties and between people. And I guess with my background in healthcare and what I did, what I was very good at in the healthcare realm was getting different voices to come to the table and to
Mhm.
talk and to try to come up with solutions. around with the patient being our center of where we needed to make change. And that included doctors, nurses, insurance companies, hospital CEOs, all the different pieces that go into providing care in different cardiovascular diseases. So I was very good at facilitating those kinds of things to say, we need to talk, and we need to put our egos at the door. And for sometimes that was a little challenging, but I was good at getting people to talk and come up with solutions. So when some of the discourse and what was going on in the district I currently represent, I felt that the representative at the time was not as willing to listen to others and to talk to all people to come up with those kinds of solutions. And I said, well, I'm going to run because I think I do have that kind of capability to have what I call having those adult conversations with people, because yelling and screaming at each other gets us nowhere. I'm sorry, it doesn't. It never has. I grew up as one of 7 children, and yeah, we could yell and scream, but ultimately that's not going to solve a problem for us. But
it's the political landscape has changed quite a bit since 2018, or even before that. Really.
It has, unfortunately, in my opinion. But there are still a lot of ways to have those conversations.
Yeah, it's okay to stir the pot a little bit. That's what I think happened with Donald Trump coming in to office. Not my favorite candidate, but he did stir the pot. He got people thinking about certain things. Certainly, in my opinion, not the best president of the United States that we had. But the idea of looking at problems in a different way, and also because people, to some degree, aren't being heard, right? Even within the Democratic Party, I think that's also the case. I think over the years, I think certain segments of the Democratic Party has been taken for granted, that they'll be there. So there's a lot of change even going on in the right?
I think when I understand the parties, what's interesting to me when I first decided to run, when you looked, you go back and you look at people's voting history. My husband and I were classified as independents because we vote both ways at the time. Now, since 2016, I'll be honest, I probably have not voted many for Republicans for various reasons. But we vote, our histories have been, we voted both ways. But it's very, sometimes the system even of running for office is set up. You have to choose. It's very difficult at this level. When I looked into it, qualifying to run as an independent would have required an exorbitant amount of signatures to even get on the ballot. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. So, and I lean more toward the Democratic. I guess you probably call, I'm probably progressive in more social aspects of governance, and probably more fiscally conservative because I am one. I don't think we should spend money we don't have. I don't do it in my personal life, but I do think that there are valid things we need to be spending money on as a government, and therefore we need to figure out how we're going to pay for it. So I do think there are a lot of people, people want to be heard. I grew up in rural Louisiana, so I understand rural, I understand urban. I think we need to make sure everyone is getting the same types of chances, however we accomplish that.
All right, so let's get into some of the issues I think that you support or that you express. But one of them is sponsoring legislation to expand the availability of Medicaid in the state of Georgia. That would add 500,000 people that are uninsured in Georgia.
Correct.
So if I understand correctly, the federal government would take care of a decent portion of that budget if we allow it to come in. But at some point, the state would probably have to take over a decent portion of that budget. So,
well, the Affordable Care Act currently, if we were to start it today, the federal government would cover 100% of the cost. That's what's still in place for at least the next 2 years. How much longer that will stay in effect, you're correct. The current match, though, is 9-1. Could that change in the future? Yes. But I think when we just say, well, it's going to cost this much, but what we need to talk about, though, is what is it costing this state right now not to cover those 500,000 people?
Okay.
And I would phrase it in a lot of different ways. Number one, we have to understand our federal tax dollars, no matter, even though we live in Georgia, goes into the pool that covers Medicaid across this country. So our dollars have left this state for that program in Kentucky, in Florida, in places that we're not getting the benefit. So those are our dollars that have left this state already. I think we should bring those back. That's number one. Number two, in my experience in healthcare, when we talk about the concept of what happens to those that are uninsured, some people think, well, we don't need to worry about them. It's up to them how they get care. But we have to understand people who do not have insurance, typically the way they're going to get help when they need healthcare coverage, it's going to be at the point at which they're going to go to an emergency room. Now, sometimes they're going there because they are so sick. That their cost is going to be very, very high to cover them. Other times they're going to that emergency room, maybe because they have a sore throat and they can't talk. They don't understand. But we have to understand in healthcare economics, covering care in an emergency room is one of the most expensive ways to deliver care versus preventative care models. So if we had a system that people had good preventative care access, it would prevent that. Because when that person goes into that emergency room, you and I are still paying for that. Because by law, hospitals have to treat any patient who comes in their door. And that's a federal law. We can't change that. So where do you, it happens. So, and then besides the concept of just covering people, we also know there are studies show that when people have health insurance, their work productivity goes up anywhere from 1% to 2% overall. That to me would be a great boom for our economy, especially right now when we're having issues with getting workforce in certain parts of the state. And then, of course, we're talking about the number of new jobs, expansion of Medicaid would do for this state. And I appreciate, and I think we should invest in places, companies like Rivian. The state's putting in close to $1.2 to $1.6 billion, which is fine to bring in an industry that's going to give us about 7,000 jobs. Healthcare, Medicaid expansion, if done well now and correctly, and all the other things that need to happen, which that's what I know how I do things. That would lower estimates are talking about 60,000 new jobs in this state. I'm like, if we're talking investment, it's an investment. And again, I'm going to say one last thing, and I know I talked too much. I was at a meeting with the president of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce the other week, and he stood up there and said, we're at the point now we need to consider healthcare as infrastructure. The government supports and pays roads. We're doing broadband expansion. We do utilities. In a lot of ways, healthcare is infrastructure. How we're going to do that, we need to fix our infrastructure of healthcare. Period.
I agree. Part of that problem is that I think that people don't understand really is that, especially in the age of COVID, when people are sick like that, then when a lot of people that would use Medicaid are lower income people that don't have that insurance, that are working hourly jobs, that have to leave that job to be able to go to get medical coverage. And if they have contagious diseases like COVID or like other, because they may not have been vaccinated, that's a worst case scenario for the rest of the population. So that's the way I look at it also, that it's not good security community security to allow 500,000 people, let's say, without insurance like that.
Correct. And I think it's part of our workforce that I think is untapped, because if you have a chronic disease that basically you cannot get care for, a lot of times you're unable to work until you can get care. So it's this chicken before the egg concept.
Yeah.
I'm not against, people working, but sometimes if you can't work because you're so sick, we're not going to give you health care until you can work.
Yeah, that doesn't.
I'm sorry.
I can understand the budget part, though, where the federal government is paying all that money, but at some point that money may go away, and the state then has to pick up that budget. And where do they fund that from?
Well,
I think that's part of
right.
that problem.
Again, we fund education. We fund healthcare now. We just have to decide how we're going to do it. And I'm not saying Medicaid expansion in and of itself is going to fix our entire healthcare systems. There's other things we need to do. Let's all be honest. Reimbursement rates need to be adjusted. We need to look at opportunities to expand private pay and or to force private insurances to live up to what they're telling the people who have insurance they're going to cover. So we need to clean up a lot of things.
For sure.
I was talking, and to figure out what I would call out of the box thinking ways to cover people that doesn't always have to be Medicaid. So like I was talking the other day to some members of the Police Benevolence Society of Georgia. I didn't know this because, up here we have great police forces and first responders who their health care coverage is done by our municipalities. We have funds. They can buy in. There are municipalities in Georgia. They are so small. Their police officers do not have health care coverage because the municipalities are so small, they can't afford it. So my thought was, and I've already so Georgia State Troopers have a insurance form policy. Why can we not, as a state, figure out a way at an appropriate prorated model to allow those same police officers who are serving their communities to buy into the state plan? Because, I think those are the kinds of things we need to identify. Where can we expand that, make it better, but yet still cover all, and the 500,000 that we do need to cover probably with Medicaid. And I would think sometimes that number of Medicaid recipients, as they go back to work, as we make it better for them, their numbers are going to drop off of Medicaid. Once you get that full-time job because your health is improved and things look better, you get that job that you can get some private insurance.
That makes sense. So let's move on to education. We'll want to be able to cover a couple of issues as well. Education, obviously, in the city of Peachtree Corners, we have a couple of private schools. We have a great public school system here: Simpson Elementary, Pictonville Middle, Norcross High School.
Right.
There a lot of involved parents in these schools also. Peachtree Elementary. There's a score of schools around here. Wesleyan is a private school. But speaking about the public model, I think one of the things that you spoke about is updating the 30-year model for state funding of public schools.
Right.
And what that, tell me a little bit about what that would mean. And then let's get quickly after that into high school vocational training programs, which I'm big for. I think that that makes sense to do that.
So specifically, the QBE formula, actually, the Gwinnett County Public School Systems is one of the ones that is being the most disadvantaged right now with the old model. It's based off of your total population of students in the system, but it also comes into what your tax base is there within your county and some other formularies. But what's built in there too is if you are a much smaller county, the percentage of the state dollars that you get is much higher than the percentage that, say, a Gwinnett or a Fulton County gets. So in effect, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it up to a point, but I think we need to review that to say, so why should Gwinnett is actually the highest one. I think you're getting only about 82 cents on the quote unquote QBE dollar, which
Hmm.
helps subsidize some parts of rural Georgia and other parts of Georgia that are receiving 130+% per student cost. Now, I, I just think we need to relook at that. I'm not saying maybe it may not still be. We need to balance it based on local tax base, but I think we need to understand, why are we doing it based on something that's 30 years old? Let's review it. Let's understand that there are opportunities that maybe Gwinnett needs to come up to 90+% of that versus, there's just some opportunities there,
Right.
especially in the areas where of our state, as you probably know, we've had a reduction in population versus in
Sure.
this area, we've
Yeah.
had such an increase in population. So some of this is based on old population, new population. So there's a lot of things we need to look at and readjust, in my opinion.
Okay. What about the high school vocational training programs that you advocate for, that public partnership or
I think that's
public-private
a
partnership?
great opportunity. I've had conversations with business owners, a lot of them car dealerships, places that they can't find people, to work as mechanics. Although now I would call them computer technician, mechanics. Because I mean, let's face it, our cars
Right.
nowadays, and other opportunities. And again, in this area, we have Gwinnett Tech, we have those kinds of
Hmm.
things. But we also have one of the things, since I've been serving, I was able to visit down in South Georgia. There's actually a true apprenticeship program, which is different than an internship. The
Hmm.
apprenticeship program, you have a private manufacturing company pays a portion along with the state, in that students are recruited in 10th grade, and it becomes part of their high school curriculum. They go and they
Hmm.
work X number of hours in this manufacturing plant, learning computer skills. They're not allowed to operate big chainsaws and, you know, dangerous
Right.
equipment per se because of age requirements. But they start in 10th grade. They then learn some more skills such as computer designing. Some of these 3D printing manufacturing companies are doing it.
Hmm.
In 11th grade, they start to get a salary. 12th, and I think it's
Okay.
around $9 an hour, but they're still going to school full. I mean, it's a part half. 12th grade, I think it goes up to $11 an hour. But what happens, and it's done through a program modeled actually off a European model. So when they graduate
Right.
from high school, they get a high school diploma, they get a 2-year associate degree diploma from the University
Hmm.
System of Georgia, and they get a guaranteed job starting at approximately $60,000 a year, and they get an international certification in their specialty. I think we need to be doing that all over the place in different areas, not just
Yes.
manufacturing. Because, you know,
Yeah.
even to me, if you can, and here in Roswell, our schools, we started in elementary school a program through my Rotary Club. We do Home Builders of America. So we have groups that we go in high school, and it's an elective kind of an after school program at first in
Mhm.
elementary school. We go in and we teach them how to build a frame structure. The kids love hammers, nails. Middle
Sure.
school, we go and we build the structures a little bit bigger, and they learn how to put electricity in it. And then in high school, they're learning something else. So they come away with some skills, whether or not they're going to be, electricians, plumbers, whatever. My plumber makes a lot of money and my electrician. Think about finishing high school with a skill set that you could be certified in. And
Yeah.
then if you choose to become an electrical engineer and go to college, you could still work,
Mhm.
60,000 plus a year to start right out of high school. I think that's a pretty good job, personally.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I would hope the state could take some leadership in that to be able to help bring that across. Because I agree with you, apprenticeship like done in Europe and other parts of this country, like Michigan,
Right.
is really important. Right.
So, yeah, so I'm talking to some of the, again, up here in my area, we have a Honda innovation plant. So they're bringing in interns, but I'm already talking with them. How can we convert that to an apprenticeship so
Yeah.
that it's a private public partnership that makes this happen for our students?
I mean, essentially what's happening is that these kids, some of them are not going to go on to college. That's not what they want. Maybe
Right.
they want to get out into the workforce.
Right.
And there are right, and there are companies out there that are dying.
Mhm.
They can't find the workers out there. And imagine having that pipeline to be able to fill those jobs.
Right. That's my idea. When my kids were in high school in Milton, they took a semester of shop, which is fine. But I think again, if students really wanted to learn more nowadays, it's not
Yeah.
just learning how to change a belt. It's the whole computers, and you have
Right.
to be very highly educated to do these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, I think the schools that bring in that, like if you're going to learn how to do an HVA system, that should let these kids work on an HVA system, take it apart, see how it's working. Those kids are the ones that are going to be able to take advantage
Now,
of this type of
and we do,
program.
and the state does have, I don't want to sell the state totally. We have that program, part of kind of the hope, the program where there are 16 specific career program paths in the technical college system that students can go to, and it's a 2-year program, but basically the state pays 100% of the cost. So with things like
Okay.
EMT, there's some other different, things that we put in place. So I think we need to expand that in a lot of ways, but also look for other opportunities that businesses, to me, when a business can identify someone very young, not well, young enough and then to teach them what they really need to know to succeed in their business, that's a
Mhm.
mentorship concept.
Right. That's right. It works well in Europe. I think it would work right
Right.
here.
Modifying it how it would work for us, but I think it would be a great.
Correct. SPLOST. Now, City of Peachtree Corners gets probably the biggest share of SPLOST in this county
Mhm.
because of the size of the city and stuff. One of the things that you have been talking about or on your website is the continued oversight of TSPLOST expenses and programs. Do you see a problem there? Do you see anything that needs to change?
I think there's just been we've made some changes and again, not that the state legislature needs to do the audits, but that the audits need to be done in the contracting process. Sometimes, when designs are done, and I would like to make sure, and again, I'm in Roswell, so we all have that same issue, that the
Right.
cities or the municipalities that these T-spots, as you know, some of it is determined how much is state pay, federal pay versus local municipalities have to be responsible for. And depending on that percentage is who gets control of design of the project.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes also be two heads butting against each other. So
Right.
I would
Sure.
like to make sure that the municipalities who are going to be affected by these changes have as much, if not more, say into those design aspects where appropriate. Sometimes it just is what it is. A bridge has to be done a certain way. And I understand that. But I think there are lots of other opportunities to have more input from local areas into some of these designs and how that money is spent, since it's all of our tax money. And that's
Okay.
what I
So more local control
well,
is what
local
you're saying.
control / local input. I think
Okay.
sometimes a lot of municipalities that I've had the pleasure of working with don't feel they've had as much input as they
Mm-hmm.
should, and that someone's
Okay.
really listening to them. And I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't know, but I think most of us are relatively intelligent people. That you explain it to us in a way, you got to explain it to us in a way that really does make sense. Don't just tell me it is because the traffic guys say this.
Right.
I'm
Okay.
probably want to question that a little bit more.
Okay. That makes sense. Sticking to transportation to some degree. The big thing here in Gwinnett County has been quite a few times there's been votes on MARTA
Right.
coming in. And it's been turned down quite a few times. There's so many times that this keeps coming up. Inevitably, I believe that MARTA will be approved eventually down the line, maybe within the decade. This county has changed demographic-wise and getting people employed here and moving around in the right way needs to change a little bit. So how do you feel about MARTA coming into Gwinnett? And how would you want to see that done?
Right.
This is the way that I think, $1 billion a mile doesn't make sense to me, but
No, and I'm, I think again, so, I live off 400, so I'm about 6 miles from the last MARTA train station. Then we have bus service up in my area on the major arteries. It's not into the neighborhoods. Um, I think again, that's where to me the locals do have to have input. I personally do think MARTA is going to be a benefit. Um, if it's designed correctly to meet the needs of the citizens of Gwinnett, to bring people in that could work, to um, people that are maybe live in one part of your county that want to work in another part, but affordable housing issues, that they need transportation over. And it's, if you don't have those kinds of transportations, you're stuck. By my areas of the North Point Mall. So now we do have a bus line that comes up to North Point Mall so that it brings a lot of employees that can come up and work in that area. So I think that's good. I'm not a big fan of heavy rail right now. I mean, I just don't think Georgia is going to really go that route in the next 20, 30 years. I mean, maybe very, very high future. MARTA, the train itself, I'm being honest. So I head down 400 when I go downtown to go to a Atlanta United game or to a game in downtown. We catch MARTA, and it's a great ride. It's, versus driving my car down, paying $20 to $40 to park to attend a sporting event. The people on those times, especially the people on the trains, everybody's got their jersey. It's kind of like you're tailgating in the train. So I've had positive experiences. When I used to work for the American Heart Association, I traveled every week on planes. So I would also take MARTA, again, from the North Fulton station all the way to the airport. It was a 45-minute ride, and it was great.
right. I can see what you're saying. I mean, coming from New York, I mean, I used to take the subway and stuff. Then I took the coach bus because it was easier, a little bit more money, but it was easier. And I felt safer, actually, because at the time it was during the late 80s and in the 70s. It was a little different on the subways. And one of my kids took MARTA as a commuter to GSU to attend college campus. He wasn't always feeling safe on MARTA. So different people had different experiences, not just on the system, but even at the stops.
Right.
Unfortunately. But that's the nature of those types of mass transit. So I understand you're not into the heavy rail, neither am I. I don't think the expense makes sense.
Right.
Light rail makes more sense, maybe, or certainly bus, rapid transit like that.
One of the things, too, that MARTA is now testing, and again, not in our area yet, but literally, especially for those people that more toward the disability and those people, that you can actually call MARTA. A MARTA smaller transport bus will show up at your door.
I've seen that.
So again, I think those are the kinds of things we need to explore. Lots of different options. In regards to safety, I think, and again, I've never had a problem or feeling unsafe on MARTA, and I understand people, that there is. I think we need to solve that problem and make it safer in all of its different variances versus, we can make it safe and we need to do that. But, I would say sometimes too, think about driving down Peachtree Industrial Boulevard, sometimes that can be dangerous too.
In a different way, yes, certainly. So Peachtree Corners is a city that likes to talk about itself as a smart city. We have Atlanta Tech Park, which is an accelerator, Curiosity Lab at Peachtree Corners, which handles a lot of startups in there. A lot of because of the street system, the autonomous vehicle presence that we keep promoting. Lots of companies are moving here from even foreign countries, and companies are relocating into Peachtree Corners.
Right.
I know you're a big advocate for working with startups, providing certain benefits for entrepreneurs. So tell me, in short, where you stand on some of those issues, what you think could benefit Peachtree Corners, and what you'd like to work on.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. And again, our statistics are showing that Georgia is a great place for a startup company. But what we're also seeing that after that first year, and unfortunately, a lot of our companies are having some issues that if they can make it to 5 years, much less grow from, say, make it to over 50 employees. So there's those opportunities. So I would like to look at concepts. How do we, again, connect these startups? And I think that's what we do in these innovation labs across the state. Connect them with mentors, successful businesses support, but not just for the startup. I think it's once you've hit a certain phase, you're going to still need money to grow your business. Now, one of the things is, to me, when we talk about angel investors, what happens, unfortunately, in Georgia, if you're an angel investor, you will take your money, because after most startups or most businesses, even if you're at that 6 months to 1 year process, that they're still eligible, or startup angel investors are interested in investing in, you don't get you sign on that you're not going to get any return on your money for at least 5 years. Well, the Georgia tax code makes it difficult that as an angel investor, you're not going to get the tax breaks for that kind of investment if you invest here in Georgia, versus if you invest in as an angel investor in North Carolina, you actually do. So my husband and we do a little bit of angel investing. And I'm not saying just for us, but I think we need to make it not just business, not just individuals, but also some of these other companies who want to invest maybe in some startup companies, that would help their businesses grow and expand and produce some things. How do we make that viable for investment? I think we also, when we talk startups, again, we do talk about, we have to have a workforce educated and ready to go for these different new things. So we've got to work on that. We've got to make sure that they want to stay here. We have amazing educational systems, especially in our higher ed educational systems, that are doing some amazing research and startup concepts. But we got to make sure they stay here, and that Georgia is the best place to run your business for various reasons. That you have a viable workforce, that you can get the investment capital you need, that your tax rates are going to be appropriate, that we can get this done.
Cool. Okay. Last subject, Mary.
I bring them for you. I feel like I'm just, if I'm not,
let's just keep
stop.
No, this is the last one. Trust me. We're going on close to 40 minutes, and I think we're doing. And I appreciate the time.
About 15, 20.
Appreciate the time you're giving me on this. So justice, safety, public.
I'm sorry, what?
Safety. We'll talk about community safety.
Okay.
That's a big thing, I think, in any community. I think people want to feel safe where they live. They want to understand that, crime hopefully doesn't touch them. But crime is everywhere, right? I think the more that we look at social media, it's amazing what's out there. If you watch TikTok long enough, you'd be like, is this happening all over the place? So it's crazy stuff. The city of Peachtree Corners is using Fusus, a company that does crime center in the cloud, real time, being able to interdict before crimes happen, almost, or while it's happening, actually.
Right.
And that's how they were able to find, to some degree, the 3 perpetrators that did the shooting at the QT on Peachtree Parkway, killed a young man that, just for his car. They ended up finding all 3 of them, and I'm sure they're going to be vigorously prosecuting them. How do you think the state can help in furthering along public safety or community safety in some of these ways?
Um, so there's lots of ways. Some of the things we have approved, and some people didn't like. The road cameras to detect not just speeding, but they do detect a lot of other things. Some of it is going to be. I'm a big proponent as much as possible for local control for certain things. The state needs to support it, but the state also needs to get out of the way. If a local municipality wants to do cameras, such as
Mhm.
Peachtree Corners is doing to make sure and their police department works with that, I think that's okay. There are some who would like to say, nowhere in the state can you do that. It may not be appropriate in certain cities and they don't want it. That's okay. My neighborhood, my husband is on the HOA and he was in charge of public safety here in the neighborhood. And in my neighborhood, we put in the cameras so that any car that comes in or out of our neighborhood, we're recording the license plate. Now, nothing
Mm.
happens except if a homeowner reports a crime to the
Right.
police. The police have the right to request those camera views so they can at least see if it's something they can track through that. Um,
Mm.
I think again, the state should never put a restriction that even that can happen. Some people say, well, we're invading your privacy. And I think it's a balancing act. I don't want the camera in my
Yes.
home, but taking a picture of my license plate, I'm okay personally. Some people aren't. But I think
Yeah.
too, the state needs to fund more. I think we know that there are municipalities, unfortunately, that we are in a shortage for various reasons. It's a tough time. COVID laid bare a
Yeah.
lot of things we need to fix. One of the things we did with the Mental Health Parity Act actually was increase funding for training for our officers across the state to to get more training in de-escalation techniques in mental health crisis situations. That's one set of issues that I believe our police officers deal with that they need that additional support too, and crime. I think with GBI, one of the things I was talking with also with the Police Benevolent Society, and again, I want to be honest, my son and daughter-in-laws are both attorneys. um,
Hmm.
both
Okay.
were assistant DAs. My daughter-in-law now is a assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District, and my son is in criminal defense now. But one of the things that the Benevolent Society was telling me about was that there is a law. It's called the Gigliano Rule that a a DA in an area can say, "I don't like you as a police officer, so I'm going to say that you are lying." And it's a little bit more complicated than that, obviously. If
Mm.
it's a federal prosecutor who does that, there's some investigation, and that person then goes under what's called the Gigliano rule, which means you're basically labeled a liar whenever you go to testify in court by law. Which but
Yeah.
the state, while that's federal and that would be
Interesting.
different, but the state actually has its own kind of rules that can happen here in the state. And police officers right now have no recourse to fight that, and I think they should. Because we all know things. So I think we need to look for those things that not just the violence and the threat of life that they are put under, but what other things, as we also are looking for ways in which to, reduce our crime rates that we can do to make it better for them to be a police officer. Um,
Sure.
I think we need to have those opportunities when there is an unfortunate police involved shooting. We need to understand that that police officer is also under stress, and we need to talk to them and understand that, but make sure that his rights are also preserved, and not just make an assumption. You know, you know. I think there are
Right.
ways we can go through that. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
I think we need to relook at ways in which how do we unfortunately open up some of our um, jail slash jail, let's call them jail beds, because once you're in prison, I think that's different versus you're incarcerated if you can't pay a bail, so you're not even have gone to trial, and yet our system
Mhm.
has become so overloaded with people who cannot make bail for sometimes relatively minor things. I'm not saying everyone should get out, and I'm not saying it should be easy, but we've got to figure out a way. We've got to have more beds to get more people off the street so they're not being released when they shouldn't be, but they're also not being held when they shouldn't be. And I'm not the expert on it.
That
I
gets
think we need to look at
and that gets a little complicated too sometimes, because I've seen, and we've seen it on social media, where some things are considered misdemeanors. And when you actually look the video of what happened, it's like, why aren't they being held on bail?
right. So I think some of that we need to revisit, and make sure. I think those, many people do need to be held, but there are some that maybe there's ways we could do this a little different, um, to make it easier for our police officers. I think we need to understand from the police officer's perspective. It is the day. I cannot imagine living that when I pull over someone just for a traffic stop, that I am walking up to the possibility of someone just pulling a gun on me. And I think that is
Yeah.
very dangerous. I'm not, so I think we need to understand that that's what they live with. So how do we change that? I don't know that we can change it one day, but I think there are ways we can work together to make it a little bit better.
Cool. We've come to pretty much the end of our time together, Mary.
Thank you.
So what I'd normally like to do is ask the individual interview to be able to give us a ask for the vote. Tell people where they can find more information about Mary Robichaux,
Thank you.
and just ask for that vote.
So
Tell us when we have to vote.
So again, I've been honored to serve as the incumbent for the last 4 years for House District 48. And I know to those of you in Peachtree Corners, I'm new there, but I have served there for 4 years. I think when we talk about, I'm one of those that we need to work with each other to get things done. I work behind the scenes. I've never been one that seeks the limelight. As my husband would say, I hide from the limelight sometimes just because it's not in my nature. When I was in healthcare, I always did things with the patient as the center of my focus of improving whatever project I was working on. When I went to the legislature, I switched that to the constituent is the center of my focus. I've taken votes, that some would say, why are you voting this way or that way? And that comes from both sides of the aisle, trust me. But I feel that I look at the vote to understand how's it going to affect my constituents, and then also how's it going to affect all of Georgia. Because again, while I represent the constituents of House District 48, I also understand that my vote that could affect all of Georgians will ultimately have an effect on my constituents here. So I try to balance that. I try to think long term. I want solutions. I don't want to just be stuck in a mire of pointing fingers at each other. If you didn't do this, so you didn't do this. We need to move past that. We are a great country. I would like to say I am the daughter of a son who was a World War II veteran. He unfortunately passed last year at the age of 95. My dad was the youngest of 8 children. My dad grew up in a 2-room sharecropper shack in the middle of a sugarcane field in Louisiana. And I feel this country allows someone like me to get to where I am now. I live in Country Club of Roswell, have a great life. My family we've had some great opportunities that we've taken advantage of. And I think all Georgians want those same opportunities. And I just want to fight to make sure that we all have that we're all held accountable, that we do it in a way that continues to push us forward. So if you want to find out more about me, again, my name is Mary Robichaux, and I do serve as the representative currently. My website is www.electmaryrobichaux.com. It's all one word. So if you want more information, and you can contact me through that website also.
Great. Mary, I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, and good luck on your campaign.
Thank you. It was great.
Take care,
Thanks
everyone.
for
Thanks for
having me.
being my pleasure.